Okay, here we go. Can everyone see?
Yeah, it has to get bigger.
Yeah, that's better.
A little
That
bigger?
good?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. All right. So we are in
Mhm.
Parshat Teitze, which,
Yes.
hey, Judy.
Hello.
Um,
Hi, Judy.
Parshat Teitze is, you know, I think according to all opinions, is the parsha that contains the most mitzvot of any parsha that we read throughout the year.
That's
I
why this
believe.
channel is so long.
I believe that the number is 74 according to most opinions.
Mm.
So there's always a lot to talk about. I mentioned in Shul last Shabbos that the Parsha opens with the mitzvah of Eshet Yifat Toar, the law pertaining to a beautiful captive woman. Much discussion about that, not for tonight's shir, but really interesting stuff as to the permission that is given to take a woman in marriage if the soldier becomes enamored with her during the course of war. And great discussion as to whether this is something that is allowed but deeply frowned upon, and is the Torah's way of trying to counter the evil impulse, the Yetzer Hara. Lots of interesting stuff. But as I said, with 74 mitzvot, there's a ton to talk about in the parsha. We're going to focus on one mitzvah, and I um and that's the issue. We'll just look at the psukim, the pasuk from our parsha, and then we'll see it appears in two other places in the Torah. Is chapter 23 verses 20 to 21. Lo tashich la'achicha neshech kesef, neshech ochel, neshech kol davar asher yishach. You shall not deduct interest from loans to your fellow Israelites, whether in money or food or anything else that can be deduced as interest. Lanochri tashich, ula'achicha lo tashich. You may take interest from a non-Jew, but not from a fellow Jew. L'man yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol mishlach yadecha ala haaretz asher ata ba shama l'rishta, in order that Hashem your God will bless you in all your endeavors and the land that you are coming to inherit. Okay, so the prohibition of interest, right? The technical halachic term is ribit, although most of us have heard it referred to as ribis. I wanted to put that as the title on the source sheet, but I thought everyone might think we're talking about frogs, so I didn't. But that's the halachic term. Um, it appears also in Sefer Vayikra and Parshat Behar. If your brother becomes impoverished, or your fellow Jew becomes impoverished, um, you have to try to sustain them. Do not take from him, how does it translate? Advanced or accrued interest, and you shall fear God, and your brother may live with you. You may not lend money at advanced interest, nor give food at accrued interest. Okay, so again, and then finally, it's working backwards chronologically, but in Sefer Shmot, Im kesef talve et ami et ani imach lo tielo kenosha lo tesimun alav neshech. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, do not act toward them as a creditor, exact no interest from them. Okay, so we have this prohibition, which is, hey, Avi, and Gwen and Lou
Oh,
are here. Hi.
hi,
Um,
Glenn.
Hi,
Hi, Lou. Hi, Avi.
we're
hey.
Avi. I'm Glenn.
So we have this prohibition
Hey.
against taking interest, which I imagine is at least theoretically known to us, right? We're familiar with Hebrew free loan societies. We're And so we're not going to really dive tonight into the details of the halacha. There are many, many, many books, shiurim online, available on the topic if anyone wants to dive deeper into it. And again, most of those will have the word ribis in the title. If you're in shopsies and you see a book with the title ribis, it's not about the frogs, it's about interest in these financial matters. We're going to look more at the philosophical underpinnings of this prohibition, but we'll touch a little bit on some practicalities perhaps as well. So just to start off, before we even get into any of the sources, linguistically, most commentators understand that the term neshech comes from the similar word linshoch, to bite, that you're sort of taking a piece away, you're biting, you're taking away from whatever wealth, whatever money the borrower may amass, you're taking away from that. Whereas ribis, the term that's more commonly used, means that you're adding on to their burden. You're increasing what they have to pay, and so right, but so that's just an interesting linguistic thing. Jeffrey Teague, and you studied with him, is that correct?
Oh, yes, we were in Ezekiel seminar together at
Okay.
Yale.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Jeffrey Teague put some interesting broader historical context into this. He says that, and you know, again, this is probably on some levels obvious to us, but that the economy with which the Torah is dealing in its prohibition against interest is not a cash economy in the way that we think of it. It wasn't an economy that woke up every day and checked the interest rates and what the Fed was going to do. It was much more simple business transactions. And so, in about the fourth line, and noted in the comments here, as noted in the comments to 15, 1 to 6, the type of loans with which the Torah regularly deals is charitable loans to countrymen who have fallen on hard times. This is clear from the statements of the present law and the psukim that we saw in Shemot and in Vayikra, which explicitly refer to the borrower as impoverished. Under these circumstances, lending is a moral obligation incumbent on those who can afford it, and it is to be done without further increasing the borrower's poverty by requiring interest, which could be ruinous. So a lot of these contemporary books talk about, well, what do you do in a cash economy such that we have, where businesses require loans and require capital in order to function? Is that the same thing, right? Does this prohibition apply in all commercial matters or in sort of business endeavors, or is this limited to personal loans? So the original context, it's very clearly related to personal loans. There's significant opinions that say if you're dealing on an institutional level, that and even perhaps between two companies, two entities, which are not individuals, even though there's discussion as to whether in at least American law, a corporation is recognized as a corporation or as an individual. But if you're dealing with corporations, if you're dealing with certainly a Jewish-owned company has no issue, whatever. So there's that discussion as to whether these prohibitions in a contemporary society apply only on a personal level, or if they're applicable in a commercial sense as well. Then he goes on and he says, although interest-free loans are sometimes mentioned in Mesopotamian texts, no prohibition on interest is known from the ancient Near East, possibly because the sites from which we have documentation have more developed commercial economies. There is an interesting letter from Ugarit in which the writers claim that gentlemen do not demand interest of each other. Greek philosophers opposed interest, and it was periodically forbidden in early Rome. As economies developed and money began to play a more important role, the prohibition of interest became impractical and the halacha devised legal means for circumventing it. Eventually, the prohibition was restricted to the realm of charitable loans in keeping with its original purpose. Okay, so interesting to think about, right? One of the really interesting questions we always ask is the Torah maintaining societal norms, historic cultural norms of the day, or is it departing from them? So often, many of the what we identify as this, the social justice type of mitzvot are in stark contrast to the norms that were around in society, right? The best example of that is when we talk about ayin tachet ayin, an eye for an eye, that is understood to be monetary value. We don't further paralyze or injure the perpetrator of those hard damages, whereas other societies literally would poke the perpetrator's eyes out or cut off their hands or whatever. So
What is a
here,
charitable loan?
a charitable loan again is a loan on when someone is poor, not a loan that you need to start a business, or a loan that you need to invest in a rental property that is going to become a cash cow. But a charitable loan is for someone who's really in financial distress and needs a loan to bail themselves out of it.
So it doesn't need a loan for
It would
charity.
be commonly called a gemilas chesed.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
Hmm.
yeah. So it's not totally true that Ribis doesn't apply in commercial endeavors, or that it's only in quote charitable loans, but that's the general thrust of where it goes. And so
I
as
just wanted to point out that Ugarit, in just in case folks are wondering, it was on the coast of Syria, and I was wondering whether the tribes like Asher or maybe Naphtali or some of them that were closer to the coast might have situations where they were wondering what to do about interest on loans,
uh
we're
uh
dealing with ships coming in and out and things like that.
yeah, I really don't know. I have
Yeah,
no
I don't
idea.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be an interesting study to for an economist to
Yeah.
dive into that, but I have no idea. Okay,
You
so but
have
here, yeah,
just to insert, there is a big example of a society that tries to live out a total ban on charging interest at all
hmm
in Islam.
right,
And they have to go through all kinds of things because in an economic society that does a lot of trade, a lot of use of different kinds of money and issues of timing of money so that the value changes. Um, they had they have to come up with alternative models, and the model that they came up with is the partnership
right.
that you're sharing in a business enterprise and you split the profit uh, uh,
So it's
from what
interesting.
comes out of it.
The shul is going through this effort to try to get some loans to pay off the mortgage, and I told Jeff and the board that there might be a serious halachic issue involved here. So we looked into it a bit, and uh, there happens to be a graduate of Chovevei Torah, Musmach, who also he has a bunch of degrees, but one of the things he has is a law degree. He's also a chaplain in the Navy, the Army. Um, and anyway, he's working at a law firm that specializes in these types of situations of specifically religious groups that have to create legal workarounds, based primarily in the Islam world. And I think they hired him to try to get some Jewish business as well. So yeah, so there is some interesting parallels. And so for anyone who's curious, the maskana is that certainly in a situation of a shul, of a Jewish institution, that's not considered a loan between individuals. So the loans that are being made to the shul are not subject to this. But there was interesting discussion about it. Okay, just
Oh,
one of many examples. We know that that this prohibition against interest is is described as one of the more severe prohibitions, right? Again, so we can't say that one mitzvah is more important or more severe than any other mitzvah, but we sometimes do nonetheless. And at least in the rhetoric, in the rhetorical, so just one example based on the pasuk in Yecheskel in verse 5, and maybe you studied this with Tige. B'neshech natan v'tarbit lakach v'chai v'lo yichye lo yichye et kol ha'toevot ha'ela asa mot yumat damav bo yihye. He has lent at advance interest or exacted accrued interest. Shall he live? He shall not live. If he has committed any of these abominations, he shall die. He has forfeited his life. Okay, so again, it doesn't, in a technical sense, seem to be a prohibition for which one would be deserving of capital punishments. And so the Medrash picks up on that. I put too much here. We really just need one line. Davar acher, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Misha chaya beribit ba'olam hazeh, lo yichya ba'olam haba. It doesn't mean that literally you're going to be executed for charging interest on a loan, but it does mean that you won't have any portion in the world to come. If your life in this world is based off of interest and charging interest, so in the world to come, you're not going to have any part. And that's just, again, one example of the severity of the prohibition, which seems to be beyond what we would have expected it to be. So the question is why? What's so bad about charging interest on loans? What's the underlying issues at play here? Someone gets in the middle of
I
saying
just want
something?
to say the last part of it is exactly the things that we did discuss in that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You say that the son should die and that whole
Yeah.
thing right there. That is definitely a flashback. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Could it be that it's taking advantage of someone who is in need?
Okay. So that's definitely one approach. Let's fast forward to that approach. And this was actually what inspired me, what got me down this rabbit hole this week, was an idea presented in the name of Rabbi Mordechai Druk. I wasn't able to find a digital version of what he wrote, but he is commenting on another verse from this week's parsha, which is the mitzvah of Shiluach Hakan, sending away the mother bird. Right, so we know that situation. You're walking, whatever. You see that there's a bird's nest. There's chicks in the nest. There's eggs in the nest. You want to take them. Before you can take them, you have to send the mother bird away. And so Rabbi Druk asked the question, why? Like, okay, so we understand that you want to show compassion, but you're allowed to eat the mother bird. You're gonna kill the babies, right? Like, what benefit is sending the birds away first, right? And we know that this is one of the ones which says that you'll have a long life if you follow this. So he says the reason is because normally if a bird is threatened, right? We know this from whenever we see a bird anywhere near us, it'll fly away, right? The second that it sees a big, strong, and imposing person walking by, the bird will fly away. A mother bird, with young chicks or protecting its eggs, doesn't have that same instinct. The instinct of the mother bird is to stay and protect the young. So Rav Druk says that's a situation where you're taking advantage of the vulnerability of the mother. That's why we have to send the mother away first in order to not really leveling the playing field, but to not be taking advantage of her vulnerability, of her heightened sense of protection. So we send her away. And it would be even more painful to the mother bird in that situation if she were to be right there and see it. So he says that it's the same thing with interest. That, as Judy suggests, that the reason why is because you're taking advantage of someone who is desperate. And if they're coming to you, right? We've all heard stories of the loan sharks who charge some ridiculous percentage, paycheck loans, whatever, taking advantage of people who have really no option left if they want to pay the bills, if they want to just barely stay afloat. So that's certainly the most common explanation, is that you're taking advantage of someone in a very desperate, very dire situation. That might be why the rules are different or applied differently when it comes to course of business versus on a personal level to an individual. So
Is there
that's
any
certainly.
is there anybody who does like a cross reference to Yosef and Mitzrayim? In terms of like the plan that he hatched with Paro during the famine, and like people were ultimately they ended up selling their fields to the government and were given their government back for like the 20% cut. So
Yeah,
like I know
I've seen. I don't remember details. I've seen it brought up in that context, right? And that's the point of what Yosef was doing, and that's a good proof text that we shouldn't be doing it. That right, and that government shouldn't be doing it either. That it can be true on a societal scale as well. Second explanation for it comes from the Sefer HaChinuch.
May I just add that in
Yeah.
terms of Ezekiel's reference, this is a time between, about 590 something and 570. I mean, it's a very difficult time for society to hold itself together. And he's with a group of people over in Babylon, and they are in exile, and there are people in Israel who are under siege, and so they were all very vulnerable. So I cannot well understand why you might want to bring this up, how important it is not to take advantage of one another in this situation, because they were really
Yeah.
under a lot of stress. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Sefer
As they are right
HaChinuch.
now. God love them.
Yeah. The Sefer HaChinuch is, I guess, fairly similar. He says, Misharshe a mitzvah, right? And this is the way that he always presents things, as he gives the rationale, the explanation for why mitzvot are given. Ki ha'el hatzov chafetz b'yeshuv amo asher bachar. God desires goodness for his chosen people. Al kein tzivala hasir michshol midarkam. Leval yivla ha'echad chel chavero. So God therefore doesn't want commanded to remove the obstacle from their path, that one should not swallow up the wealth of his friend without his even feeling it, until he finds his house empty of all good. Right? This is the way of interest, and the matter is well known. And that's why he says why it's called neshech, bite, because it's biting. It's very damaging. And right, sometimes you don't even realize, right? You sign up for a loan, it sounds like decent, and then until that first bill comes in, you don't realize what you really got yourself into, or how damaging that might be. So again, he sees it as a way to avoid taking advantage, as a way to ensure that people don't become even more destitute as a result of this.
There's an institution. I'm sorry. There's an deal. It was established in the 1920s by a couple of very prominent Jewish merchants, and it was designed to help people, students of one age or another, to be able to get an education or training, and they provided free loans.
Mhm.
It's called the oh dear,
Free Loan Society.
no, the free loan society. There's a specific one for college students, and I'm blanking on the name of the institution. I benefited from them.
I did too. They helped me pay for my PhD.
The free loan institution here in Baltimore for students, around for 100 years, was
Mhm.
created in the Jewish community for the Jewish community. It still exists, although most of the recipients currently are poor people who are not Jewish but who qualify. They can borrow several $1,000s and so on, no interest, with 10 years to repay after graduation and so on. And they leverage it with some funding from the state students.
Is everyone else having a hard time hearing
Going
Robert?
back,
Robert? Hello? Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me?
degree in engineering and so on. In both of our cases, we didn't take the advice and did what we did, hopefully for good. But it's an interesting institution. They're
Yeah.
capitalized at something on the order of $12 million.
Wow.
And they give out loans in the amount of a couple of million each year. They're actively celebrating that centennial in the coming month of November. So you may see some publicity about it. I mention it in part because it was originally part and parcel of the Jewish community. It's now a general institution, but the leadership of the board of trustees and the major donors and the funds that have been established over the years that have grown by investment and so on are clearly from the Jewish community. And it's an interesting dynamic of the institution now trying to be general, but paying at least some lip service, some gratitude to the Jewish community
Yeah.
for creating a structure which is assisting many, many, many African American and other students, as well as some Jews.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on, the Ramban has a different explanation. The Ramban says, Lo tashich la'achicha, gam zu mitzvah mivo'eret, yosif bekan azhara gam la'love. So, right, so he says this is explained elsewhere in Vayikra, and here it adds on, not only to the lender, but the borrower is also included in the prohibition. Masha einkein b'chol dinei mamonot she'im ratzahu lizok minichasav rashai. Right? Generally, in other monetary laws, if you want to take on bad terms, bad conditions, and agree to it, you're allowed to. But here, there's a prohibition against there's equal prohibition against the borrower to participate in such a loan. Because of the dangers of this sin, then the borrower is also warned, is also included. But the Torah also tells us that charging interest to a non-Jew is permitted. Right? So clearly, charging interest is not the same thing as gezel. It's not the same thing as thievery. Because if it was thievery, so there's some rather disturbing discussions about gezel hagoy, about whether there's the same punishments. But fundamentally, it's you're not allowed to steal from a Jew or a non-Jew. You're not allowed to steal. So if it were an issue of stealing, then it would clearly not be allowed to a non-Jew. Kimosha Amru Bava Kama, Gezel Goy Aser, right? It says that stealing from a non-Jew is prohibited. Aval haribit shehuna asela da'at shnehem v'yirtzonam lo ne'esar ela mitzad ha'achva v'hachesed. Ribbit, interest, which is agreed upon by both sides, by the lender and by the borrower, is only prohibited because of achva v'chesed, because of unity, brotherhood, and kindness. Kamosha tziva v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, as we're told that you must love your fellow Jew as yourself. Kamosha amar, yishamer lecha pentia davar im levavcha b'li'al, and as it said, be careful lest you hold contempt in your heart. Al kain amar lemani yavrecha Hashem elokecha. Therefore, it says that in order that God should bless you, ki chesed v'rachamim yaseh im achiv, kasher yalvenu below ribit v'techashev lo litzdaka, because it is a great kindness and act of compassion, of mercy, that one does for one's fellow, for one's brother, when you loan to them without interest, and it's considered as tzedakah. So, right, so I don't know if that means technically it's considered tzedakah, like you can count that towards your tzedakah allocation for the year. I could have charged 5% interest on this loan and I didn't, or it just means more abstractly tzedakah, that it's justice. It's the proper thing to do. V'chein hashmita chesed be'achim, right? Shmita is also an example of kindness among brothers, and that's right. So the Ramban, again, not taking away from the other explanations that we've seen, but the Ramban really emphasizes that this is a special requirement in order to express Jewish unity, in order to express our compassion, our identification with our fellow Jew. We have a requirement above and beyond what would have otherwise been required.
It's cool because like Ramban is saying that there are these, like for theft, like that's like a universal human law, right?
Yeah.
As don't steal. And so therefore it doesn't apply, like it also applies equally to non-Jews, but this is like a level of v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and so it's specific just to Jew and Jew. I love that. And nice.
Yeah. Okay, Rav Hirsch, again, so if anyone's ever tried to read through Rav Hirsch, again, it's translated from the German, so I think Robert knows some German. Anne, did you have to study German for your doctorate?
It was one of my undergraduate majors. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple
Yes.
German
Beatrice.
speakers who might.
And had
Oh,
to.
Beatrice also probably knows. Oh, maybe Lou, do you know German?
Ish.
Only
Yeah.
by only yes.
Okay, so we got a lot of German speakers here. Maybe I could have brought them
We
up
should have
first in
brought
the
in
original.
German, totally, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so the English translation of the German is extremely verbose. I assume that's because the German is very verbose as well. So here's the summary, right? So we saw that the prohibition is discussed in Sefer Shmot and Sefer Vayikra. He has pages and pages and pages in his commentary on those verses, and here in our parsha, he has sort of just a summary of what he said previously. And again, it's a little wordy. It's not quite the syntax that we might write with, but I think the idea is quite nice, and I think we can handle it. We have already fully elucidated the prohibition of interest in Shmot and Vayikra. We recognize the fact that charging interest at the usual normal rates can in no way be considered as anything wrong in itself, right? Just like the Ramban noted, controverting the idea of what is right and just, but that it rather belongs to the sphere of those great Jewish acts of acknowledgement which are incumbent on Jews to perform, such as Shabbat, Shemitah, Yovel, by which God is looked on and avowed as the real owner of all Jewish possessions. We tried to show the remarkable position which the prohibition of interest occupied in all its momentous consequences for the whole business and social intercourse of the nation for which the founding of Israel as the people of God was intended to prepare the way. Okay, so the first thing he says is that while the Ramban says it's a special requirement to promote Jewish unity and a sense of brotherhood, for Rav Hirsch, it's theological. It's driving home the point that we may think that this is our money, and so therefore we can charge interest. We worked hard for it. We can charge interest. We're doing a great chesed by not charging interest. No, it's a reminder that all of our wealth ultimately comes from God. We're just the custodians of it, and so therefore we can't charge over and above what is the principle because it's not our money to be demanding from others. We have also remarked just how two laws that on the one hand not only charging of interest but with quite equal severity, the paying of it was forbidden, and on the other hand, both taking and paying interest is permitted to be done to non-Jews, definitely removed the interest prohibition from the idea of it being wrong in itself and characterized it as a great act of acknowledgement of God, an acknowledgement which would be opposed equally by the giving or taking of interest. According to that, we also understand why not only a repeated injunction against interest, but quite especially its two characteristic laws were kept for this compendium for the settling in the land. Right? He says that in our parsha and Sefer Devarim is repeated in the context of other mitzvot that are going to be applicable, right? Or it says, right, when you go to the land, this is what you should do. Just with that settling, the real business and social traffic began, for which the duty to give loans without interest, but especially the prohibition of any and every kind of interest were of the most fundamental importance and calculated to foster that spirit under the influence of which alone the general and social conditions would assume a form deserving of general happiness and God's blessings. It's quite a long sentence. But anyway,
Probably
so
one word in German.
yeah. So anyway, so the 2 points he makes is number one, this is really a theological message. It's a message that right, we should remember that our wealth, our money comes from God. We're merely the custodians of it, and so therefore to charge interest would be really he says it's not stealing, but it would be taking from God, and that would certainly not be appropriate. And the second is he says that the context here is when you go into the land, because recognizing that's when the real economic life is going to begin. So it's driven. The point is driven home again here. One more explanation. And that comes from Rabbi Yitzchak Yehuda Trunk of Kutno. He was the Av based in. You can see his dates. Oh, now you can see his dates. We get the Hebrew and English all in one screen. Okay. And this was brought. Some of you might know the wonderful work Iturei Torah, which is a compilation, a collection of various, primarily Hasidic, but not exclusively Hasidic. What we'll call vorts on the Parsha, really an interesting work. So Rabbi Trunk says as follows, Tam le'isra ribit, the reason for the prohibition, ki Hashem yitbarach rotzeh she'adam ya'aseh chel miyagia kapav. God wants us to be productive, to achieve success through our hard work. As it says in our verse, in order that God will bless you in all that you will do. And not that a person should sit by doing nothing, just amassing cash because of the interest that's being paid to them. That we have to be productive. Right? Do not charge
Rabbi, I
interest
think
to
you
your
just turn
brother.
off your video because you're going in and out.
Oh, sorry. Sounds okay to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm missing half of what you're saying.
Yeah. Right? In order, right? So you may not charge interest to your brother in order that God will bless you in all that you do, in order that your blessing should be through your own handiwork. Okay, so it's really a call to work. It's a call, right? So what would he say for most of our jobs, most of our professions? I don't know.
Well, it
Some
sounds
of
like a
us,
socialist,
yeah, definitely.
to put it lightly.
Yeah. So, but anyway, but we certainly have an idea of the value of work, and you know, on the flip side, some might say that if you're able to earn a parnasa from interest from payments rolling in, then you can sit and learn Torah all day, and that would be good too. But that doesn't seem to be what Trunk is saying. He seems to be really valuing the idea of putting in hard work to earn a livelihood, which is an
Regarding
important
Rav
idea.
Yitzhak Rav Yitzchak Yehuda Trunk, he was probably the son of another Rav Trunk of Kutna, who's known as the Kutna Rav, and
Hmm.
who was the founder of Mizrahi.
Okay.
He was the one who decided it needed to be created, and was an important figure. Either the son of this Rav Yitzchak Yehuda Trunk or his nephew was my teacher, Yeshaya Trunk, Olav Shalom, who taught for many years, starting before World War II in Lodz and in Warsaw, in Jewish schools. And after World War II, was in Poland, and then in New York, at what's now the Center for Jewish History. A remarkable scholar from an absolutely astounding family of the Trunks. Remarkable people.
Wow.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. And Avi just shared a link to the biography. Thank you. Yeah, so maybe he's envisioning us. We should all be working on a kibbutz. It sounds like is with the family background. Okay, so those are those are the various approaches to this prohibition. As we see, it is it does drive home very important messages. Whether that war again, and whether how literally we should take the midrashim that talk about you have no portion in the world to come. It's you're deserving of capital punishment. Right, so clearly there's some hyperbole there, but ribis is seen as a very severe prohibition. And so this gives us some of the basic explanations as to why that might be the case. Um, I did, it was already touched upon, but it is quite interesting to think about in the Mishnah, and this is getting much more halachic and technical, but in the Mishnah in Bava Metzia, um, um, yeah, we'll just pick up in Yud Aleph, Elu Ovrin Belota says, where it says 11 in the English. Elu Ovrin Belota Hamalve, Halove, Ha'arev, Ha'edim, V'chachamim Omrim Af HaSofer. Right. So in the Mishnah, it says that the following transgress the prohibition of interest, not just the lender and not just the borrower, but the Arev, the guarantor, the person who guarantees, who vouches for the borrower that they're going to pay it back, the witnesses, the people who sign the contract, and the sages say even the sofer, even the scribe who writes up the contract, is guilty and is liable for participating in interest. So again, we see it's taken very seriously, and that's it's any trace of interest. So the final page, final two pages, the common workaround. This is getting very practical and very summary. I don't want to get. I don't fully understand all the details. So so even if I wanted to get into them, I'm not sure I could. But the fine, that we do have what's called a heter iska, which literally is, there's a debate about how to translate it, but some translate it, as Robert said, is the strategy in the Muslim community as a formation of a partnership. Others say, more literally, heter permission iska business. It's a permission to conduct business, which basically takes what would be a conventional loan made with interest and turns it into some sort of investment whereby the lender becomes an investor in the borrower's endeavors. The mechanisms of guaranteeing the loan, right, in a conventional loan. So you have, the one asset, talk about a mortgage. So the house is the collateral against the loan. Here you have to pool other assets, not just that one specific purpose of the loan, or maybe you can't even designate a specific purpose. It's a more general loan. And then it becomes an investment rather than a loan. And as an investment, investors are entitled to return on their investment and ROI. And so by doing that, and also making it such that the means, to impose any sort of lien or to declare it in default becomes very, very, very difficult. So that with a heter iska, there is a greater risk than if you were to go through a conventional mortgage, whereby the bank can possess the house, the car, whatever. But there's a very, very high burden of proof to show that this loan is not going to be repaid at all. And then the final page, again, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but even the websites are quite interesting. So we have a heteriska.org, which will help businesses put together, and then this KFI Kosher Financial Institute, which offers, I think, similar services. They seem to be in it more for the profit in some way. So I think they'll do halachic audits for businesses or whatever, but they had this flow chart that tries to lay out the differences between a conventional loan and a heter iska. And so we do have workarounds, and most in Israel, it's a given that every bank has signed a heter iska, and has, whether it's required or not is a separate question, but assuming they've all signed heter iskas. Most major financial institutions that have Jewish ownership in the United States for sure have heter iskas. There was an issue with, I think it was direct loans a few years back, where it was revealed that one of their major investors, partners, was Jewish and did not have a heter iska, and there was a big crisis, I guess, in the Orthodox world about what to do with that. It was straightened out. It is a real issue. Um, you know, I would like to get a better understanding of it, and maybe then we can explore together a little bit more of the details, right? And how, we have all sorts of legal workarounds, legal fictions, legal solutions that we employ. Right, most familiar to us is Mechirat Chametz, selling of Chametz, but we have lots of other ones as well. And this is a very important one, which people don't often think about. Again, in a commercial setting, there's more leniency, and certainly in a commercial setting, whatever concerns there are generally of rabbinic nature and not a biblical nature. But an individual taking a loan directly from a bank, directly from a lender, if it's a private lender, could face serious issues. So it's important to have an awareness when conducting business, if it's between Jewish, Jewish parties, that this may very well come into play, and should be
Rabbi, I'm
spoken
seeing
about.
in this one of the, sorry if I could jump in.
Yeah,
I'm
please.
noticing like one of these, the line that like I'm going over is like it's like virtually unheard of, that a borrower has successfully defaulted on the principal by meeting the heteroskop burden of proof. So this also seems to be somewhat connected to the guarantee for the loan, right? Because in in everything we've been talking about taking interest on a loan, like what if nothing comes back,
Right,
from the
right.
loan? And so the Torah does it. The Torah seems to, I don't know. Is there a guarantee on these loans? Are you allowed
No, I
to?
mean they're the opposite. We have Shemitah and Yovel, so eventually
Right.
debts are canceled out.
So, but
Um,
somebody puts up their, I don't know, like maybe they put up property and they do, I don't know. You can't, right? Shemitah for the land for sure.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, it's clear that the Torah was envisioning a very different economic reality and economy than what we're dealing with, which is why, despite what may seem like all these loopholes and legal fictions, they're necessary and even, and legitimate to rely upon. Is that that's the way that we're able um, to apply these mitzvot in a very different um, setting and reality. So anyway, I'm going to stop now. I assume there might be some people that want to turn on their TVs in a few minutes to see the debate, or stay far away from their TVs and avoid the debates, whichever works for you. I sent an email out during the week. Next week
Oh,
is back to school night, and Toby is out of town, so I'm on back to school night duty. I can do Monday or Wednesday, and of those who responded, it seemed to be equal for either day. So does anyone have a strong preference for next week, Monday or Wednesday? And
I
if
can't do Mondays.
you can't do Mondays, okay?
Yeah.
So let's do Wednesday.
Wednesday's fine for us.
Okay, so next week on Wednesday, if you can't make it, totally understand. And we'll reconnect in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, have a good rest of the week. Have a good night, and I'll see everyone soon.
Thank you, Rabbi,
Thank you.
and all the
Okay.
other contributors.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, everyone. Great conversations.
Yeah.
I-
Lago Tov.